Hey guys, Mr. Wiz here. Welcome back to the channel. We are still working our way through all of these MakeCode arcade extensions. There's a whole bunch of them. We're getting near the bottom of the page, but keep in mind, even when we finish this page, there's more that I'm going to show you that are not on the recommended list. So if you're not already subscribed to this channel, subscribe so you can get access to all those videos when they come out. Okay, so today we are going to work on timers. That is the next one on our list here. By the way, if you're new to this channel, we build video games. That's what we do here. So we've did an entire playlist of videos you can check out. I think there's about 30 videos there, which just teaches you the basic on how to build games in MakeCode. And now we're focusing on all these awesome extensions and how you can use them to make your games even better. So today we're doing timers. This is one of my personal favorites just because of how easy it is to use and also how helpful it can be sometimes. I use timer extension in most of the games that I build. And once I learned how to use it, I can't get enough of it. It just helps me solve a lot of problems that'd be difficult without. So let's take a look at it. Timer extension, you just download it by clicking on it. The program I have open right now is our old asteroid program, where we have the asteroids coming across the screen and the player shoots at them. And we've done a lot of stuff with this program. We first got introduced to this when we were learning about projectiles, but we have come back to it in the past and added things like animations, which you can see here, right? So we have played around with this program in a few different ways. The reason I wanted to pull it up today is because whenever I have my students build this program for the first time and they start playing it, it doesn't take them very long to realize you can just spam the shooting button and not really have any issues. The game gets really, really easy if you're just fast at clicking, right? So by spamming the button, they can destroy all the asteroids and have almost no risk to themselves. The game gets too easy. So I opened that up so that we could take a look at how we could improve that using the timer extension that we're looking at today. So once you have the timer extension, it shows up in your toolbox right here. It's its own little section. When you click on it, it's only 4 blocks. I told you guys this was a small extension. It's only these 4 blocks. For action at most, every after action settled for so many milliseconds, separately do, and just after so many milliseconds do. I love this extension. All right, very easy to use. So let's talk about what these blocks actually mean. This first one is the one we're going to use in this program. For action at most every. Basically, this block limits how frequently certain actions can happen. So in this case of this projectile game, if the player is spamming their shoot button and they're pressing it too much and it's making the game less fun because of that, we can throw one of these in here and it limits how often they can actually shoot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go find the on A button press. Here it is. This is what's creating the laser. There's no limit on it right now. So literally it creates one depending on how fast they can press that button. If they're really fast clicker, they can create a whole bunch of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw an at most every block in here. And now I can set a time on how often they can actually shoot. So if we leave it at 500, now they're limited. They can only shoot basically 2 a second because they can only shoot 1 every 500 milliseconds. All right, so if I'm playing it now, there's already a big gap. Even though I'm pressing really, really, really fast, it's not shooting as fast as I'm pressing, right? Now, the cool thing about this is it's not creating a delay. It might seem like there's a delay, but there's not. If I only shoot 1 at a time, they're still instantaneous. The only time it hinders me is if I'm trying to what we call spam the button, right? If I'm just trying to button mash, it's not effective. But if I'm being calculated with my shots, it's still a very effective game. It doesn't delay me at all. And this is important because without that extension, I've had students try to create things similar to this where they'll use the pause button in here to limit how often something can happen. And it's not going to be as good, right? Because if you put the pause button in there, it actually is creating a delay. It is creating a pause. Using this does not create a delay. It just limits how often the player can use it. All right, so this is probably the most common thing that I see my students use the timer extension for is limiting projectiles or something similar that they don't want the player to spam. One thing I want to mention about this, where it says action, this is actually the name of what's happening inside of it, right? So if I leave the word action there, then this is now known as an action. And what I can do is I can use this block and put it somewhere else in my code. So after an action is settled, so after that's done, something else happens. Why would I do that? I don't know, but I could, right? Maybe, ooh, I got an idea. Just to throw something in here. Let's do a special attack. And when you press the B button, something big happens. What should happen? Maybe it's a big laser. I'll copy this and change its appearance to make it tall. Or we'll just do a button fill. There we go. So that's a much bigger shot. And we'll do that with the B button press, but we want to limit how often people can use it. So I'm going to put, let's do 3 seconds, so 3,000. All right. Okay, so first problem I'm going to have here, and this is an important thing, I'm glad I'm doing this. The first problem I'm going to have here is that they both have the same name, action and action. If you're going to use this block in more than one part of your code, you need to give it a different name. If you don't do that, it's going to cause problems in your program because the program treats them both as if they're the same action, essentially. So we can call this, here, I'll rename this one to Big Gun. All right. So, and this one can only happen every 3 seconds. So I've got my regular laser here. And then if I press the bigger laser, there we go. You know what? Just to make it more fun, let's make that laser bigger. Let's make that laser a lot bigger. I'm going to go with tall. The size of the screen is 120. Let's do 100. This is going to be basically destroy everything kind of laser is what I'm going with here. Although it will still only hit once. That's okay. I could change more of my code if I want to, but I'm not going to do that. Just for the effect of the game, we're just going to make it a bigger version of the original blaster. But I can only use it once every 3 seconds. Yeah, if I was making a finished game, I would probably change the code so it goes the whole way across the screen and doesn't get destroyed automatically when it hits the first guy, right? But I'm not really worried about that for the sake of this video. All right, so if I press it a bunch, it's not going to work again for another 3 seconds, right? See how that's working? Okay, so let's say we want something to happen after these are occurring. That's when we would use the after block. So what should I have happen after it gets settled? After action settled for, let's do 3 seconds as well. And let's add a sound effect that lets the player know that it's got recharged. Power up sound. Let's see how that works. I'm going to unmute this. All right, so if I press B, it should create one. It just did. And then after 3 seconds, I should hear the power up sound. There we go. And that lets me know I got a new one. I don't use this block very often, but you can. So if you want something to happen, oh, I put it on the wrong thing. I have it set to action. That's why it didn't work the way I thought it would. It was waiting 3 seconds after this. I need to wait 3 seconds after Big Gun. Okay. I was wondering why it wasn't doing it quite the way I thought it was going to. Let's try this again. All right. So the regular gun's working fine. I'm going to shoot the big gun. And then after 3 seconds, it should play the sound. Okay, so it's not going to do it if I spam the button. One, two, three. There it is. All right. So, yeah, you could set something to happen after something else has resolved. But yeah, I don't really love that block, if I'm being honest. I'm going to go ahead and destroy it from this game. Okay. But, if you're clever with it, you could use this in some pretty interesting ways. You might not. What am I thinking? Maybe it could be after a boss fight, right? The boss performs a certain action, and then something happens after that action is finished. So this can be an interesting way of controlling the time. That's why it's called the timer extension. These blocks are all about helping you control when things happen in your game, helping you control the time. So they do stuff similar to the pause, but it gives you a lot more control because pause doesn't always work very well. Sometimes pause can pause your entire game and it can create some weird lag. So the timer extension is a great way to avoid that. All right, so now we have the separately do and the after. The after block is essentially identical to what the pause does, right? The difference is it doesn't create that lag. So if you have something that you want to happen after a certain amount of time, if you try using the pause and it doesn't work well, it creates some bugs in your game, take the pause out, go download the timer extension, and use this. It works very well. So in this game, I don't really have a good example of how I would use that, but this block works very, very well. Separately do is an interesting block because it allows an action to occur while another action is occurring. Rather than coding this, I want to show you guys an example of a game that I made a few years ago that I'm very proud of. I worked pretty hard on it, and it uses these blocks in some interesting ways. So let me go ahead and show you guys this game. This game is called Lander Commander. I made it for a little science presentation type thing where we were at a STEAM festival, a science and technology festival, and I put this game on an arcade machine so that kids could come and play and they could learn a little bit about science while learning a little bit about spacecraft and all of that. So this game, you're building a spaceship to go to Mars. My students did not make this game. This was a game that I made, but I worked pretty hard on it. And I want to show you the game, and then I want to show you the code. I'm not going to play the game, the whole thing for you because it's kind of long. But it starts off with this little red bird in a spacesuit, and you got a picture of Mars here. By the way, I did not draw these sprites. I imported them using a trick which I showed you in a video a while back. I'll put a link to it probably right here if you're interested in learning how to upload photos into MakeCode Arcade. So it starts with a little introduction about, oh, you're going to Mars and you have to build a spaceship, right? I'm just going through the story pretty quick here. So my game is designed so you are designing your own spaceship, and the way you build the game does affect, the way you build your ship does affect the difficulty of the game because it's a lander game. The goal is to land as softly as possible. So heavy ships are harder to slow down. Lighter ships slow down quicker, but they're also, you can give them too much power sometimes, right? So it's about finding the right size ship, finding the right size engine. Bigger engines have more power, more thrust, but sometimes it can be too much. All right. So this is the part right here that I want to show you. So I've just finished designing my ship, and I've got to this part. This is almost like a cutscene in a story that I created to progress and introduce the players to what they're actually doing, right? So it says, wow, what an awesome spaceship. We're ready to go. This trip will take about 5 months. I hope you packed a lunch. That's a joke. All right. So right there, you saw how the spaceship moves. There's music. All right, now we have a little bit more of a story. It says, after 5 months, you finally reach Mars. It's time to begin your descent. And so that was something kind of fun there. The music was playing. Mars was getting closer to us. So it was supposed to look like we were flying into the planet. And now was the part where you actually get to the game, right? Where you try to land your spaceship. And we'll talk more about this at some other time, I'm sure. The goal is to land as softly as possible. You can see their speed and the distance in the top there. By the way, that text you see, I built with the arcade text extension. The arcade text extension will be the next one. The arcade text extension will be the next one that I cover in the next video. Goals to land softly. 22 kilometers per hour is how I landed. Not bad. Feel free to try it yourself. I'll put a link in the comments there. But let's take a look at the code. I'm sorry, not in the comments. I'll put the link in the description. All right. So there's a lot of code here. I don't want you worrying about most of it, but I do want to show you how I use the timer extension. So let me see if I can find it right quick here. Here it is. So here's where it's building the different scenes. In the beginning, you've got the part where you're choosing your ship. You have the part where you're choosing your engine. And right down here is where we get to the story after you finish building your ship. I create the sprite to talk to you. And I set where it says my sprite, that's the name of the ship. So I set my sprite's position. And it says, wow, what an awesome ship. You're ready to go. This trip will take about 5 months. I hope you packed a lunch. Then the space dude disappears and the ship's velocity is set. So I want you to notice all this happens 1 second after everything else. So I use the after do block. So after the space dude shows up on the screen, there's a 1 second delay before he starts talking. And I did that on purpose because I wanted you to see him and I wanted you to see the ship, right? So there's a 1 second delay before he starts talking to you. Then, after he says all this, he disappears. The spaceship is given a velocity of Vx negative 40 and Vy 30. So that means it's moving 40 pixels per second to the left and 30 pixels per second down, because that's a positive y. So positive y is down, negative x is to the left, so it's moving down and to the left. You probably didn't even notice this when I was showing you the game. But what happened is the ship was next to the space dude. He's talking. When he finishes talking, he disappears, and the ship moves from the side to the middle of the screen. That's what's happening here. So I gave it a velocity of negative 40 in the x direction, positive 30 in the y direction. Then after 1 second, I set its velocity to 0. You get that? So it moved 40 pixels to the left and 30 pixels down for 1 second. And then it stopped. And that created that gradual motion to the center of the screen. So I had to figure out some distances, a little bit of math there, right? And that got me where I needed to go. Okay. Then after it moved, some music played. And I want you to notice it says separately do. So actually, it would have been happening the same time that it was moving. Yeah, it wouldn't have been after. It would have been happening the same time it was moving because it's separately do. Separately do means it happens at the same time as the blocks before it. So it played the music. Then after it plays that music, so for 4 seconds. So it plays music basically for 4 seconds. After that, we have the new message appear, right? So the Mars appears in the corner of the screen. It has a scale of 0.1. And it says, after 5 months, you finally reach Mars, and it's time to begin your descent. Then separately do, it starts playing the music. And it goes through a loop where Mars gets a little bit bigger. So, and here I use a normal pause. So 500 millisecond pause, and it gets bigger and bigger. So when you see Mars in the corner, and it looks like it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, that's this part right here, right? And it's happening while the music's playing because of the separately do block. So while the music's playing, Mars is getting bigger. All right. And I think that's all the places I use the block. But I wanted to show you that because I had to use several of these timer blocks in here to get that to play the way I wanted it to, right? It's not a big part of my game. It's only about 10 seconds of my game. But it was important to me that it played in the right order. The music played when I wanted it to play, that you saw things when I wanted you to see them, that everything wasn't happening instantaneously, right? So that's where all these pauses are coming in. So let's look at it one more time so you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. And we'll just get to it real quick. So all this part is happening instantaneous right now. I'm going to pick a ship. And then here comes the part where we just looked at. So for a second, you look at it before the text comes up. Then the text is here. Then after the text goes away, I want you to notice how the spaceship moves to the center of the screen. There it is. Yep. And there was the music that was playing under the separately do section, right? And there we go again, playing music separately from the action. So Mars was looping, the scale was changing to make it look like it was getting bigger, and the music was playing, and all that played out the way I wanted it to for this game. So that's all I want to show you really about this extension, is that there's only 4 blocks, but if you get good with them, if you learn how to use them, you can get much better at building good video games, okay? All right, so I hope you learned something new today. If you did learn something new, please click that like button. If you build something using the timer extension and you want to share it, hit that share button, put your link in the comments. I will see you guys in the next video where we will look at arcade text, which is how I put the text on the screen in this game that appear at the top and at the bottom. So that text that I put here and down there, I use the arcade text feature, what we will look at in the next video. So I'll see you guys then.